The battlefield was quiet, but it was not peaceful. Smoke drifted slowly over broken stone and burning metal. The air smelled of ash, blood, and melted steel. Bodies of many species lay scattered across the ground, still and silent, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The war between the Galactic Coalition and the human worlds had ended only hours ago. But death had not yet finished its work. Valthira walked alone through the ruins. She was known across the stars as the first blade of the Keltaria warrior who had never lost a duel, never shown mercy, and never hesitated. Her armor was dark silver, scratched and cracked from countless battles. Faint blue lines glowed along her arms and neck, old battle scars that told stories of survival and violence. Her people believed emotions were dangerous. Compassion made a warrior weak. Mercy invited death. Valthira had lived by these truths since childhood. Until today. Her sensors detected a life sign. Ahead. One. Human. She stopped moving. Humans were dangerous in their own strange way. Fragile bodies, short lives, but a stubborn refusal to surrender. Even now, after losing this world, some still refuse to die quietly. Valthira's hand moved before thought caught up. Her blade slid free from its sheath with a sharp, singing hum. Blue energy rippled along its edge, lighting the smoke around her. The weapon was ancient, bonded to her by blood and oath. It had ended hundreds of lives. One more would mean nothing. She stepped forward, boots crunching over broken glass and armor fragments. That was when she saw him clearly. The human stood near, the wreckage of a shattered transport ship. Flames flickered behind him, painting his shape in orange light. His uniform was torn and burned. One arm hung useless at his side, soaked in dark blood. His face was bruised, streaked with dirt and sweat, yet he did not run. He did not beg. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, as if he had already accepted whatever came next. Valthira raised her blade. "Human," she said, her voice cold and sharp, echoing across the ruins. "You are alone. Drop to your knees." The human lifted his head. His eyes were tired, old. They carried a deep sadness that surprised her. She expected fear. She expected anger. She saw neither. "I can't," he said quietly. The simplicity of the answer unsettled her. Valthira stepped closer, blade angled toward his throat. "Then you will die." The human closed his eyes for a moment, like someone listening to distant memories. When he opened them again, there was no panic in his gaze. "Yeah," he said softly. "I figured." He slowly lifted his good hand. Valthira tensed instantly. Muscles coiled, ready to strike. Humans were known for last tricks, hidden weapons, desperate moves. But his hand was empty, palm open. Not in surrender. In display. Something was burned deep into his skin. Valthira froze. The symbol was old and scarred, not fresh. A broken star crossed by a single line. The edges were uneven, like it had been burned in during chaos. Not ceremony. Her breath caught in her chest. Her blade trembled. That symbol. No doubt her mind rejected it instantly. That mark did not belong on human flesh. That mark was sacred. Among the Keltari. It was known as the Oath Mark, a sign given only to those who had saved a Keltari warrior at the cost of their own future. A mark that bound life to life, debt to blood. Valthira had seen it only once before, on her mother's hand. Her grip loosened. The blade lowered by a fraction, then another. "No," she whispered, her voice suddenly unsteady. "That is impossible." The human looked down at his palm, as if surprised it was still there. "This?" he asked gently. He looked back up at her. "It's just a scar." Valthira's heart pounded hard inside her chest. "That mark," she said slowly, struggling to control her breath, "should not exist." The human tilted his head slightly. "Funny," he said. "I was told the same thing." The smoke shifted around them, and the battlefield seemed to fade away, for the first time in her life. Veil Thera did not know what to do. Her blade, once steady and unstoppable, now pointed at the ground dot and everything she believed about enemies. War and humans began to crack. Veil Thera stood frozen, staring at the human's palm. The oath mark burned in her memory like fire, a symbol she had thought existed only in stories and old histories. It was sacred. It bound life and death, debt and honor, in a way no outsider could understand. And yet here it was, etched on human skin. The human's eyes met hers, calm, tired, honest. He did not flinch, did not try to hide the mark. "I didn't choose this," he said softly. "It chose me." Veil Thera's chest tightened. Her instincts screamed at her to strike, to finish the human, but her hands refused. Her mind was a storm. How could a human carry the symbol of Keltari life debt? How could he survive? How could he be here now, after all that had happened? "Where did you get this?" she demanded, her voice sharp, trembling with something she had never felt before. Uncertainty. The human raised his hand a little higher, showing her the mark. It was scarred and faded, yet unmistakable. "A medic burned it into me," he said quietly. "Many cycles ago, during the battle on Vatris Prime." Veil Thera's breath caught. Vatris Prime. That battle had been infamous across the Keltari systems. She remembered it clearly. She had been a child then, hearing whispers of the carnage, of brave warriors lost, of heroes buried under rubble and fire. Her mother had fought in that battle, leading her unit with unmatched courage. And the human before her. Could it be possible? Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Her blade hung loosely at her side, no longer threatening. "Because I saved one of your warriors," he said, his voice steady but soft. "I carried her from the ruins while the world burned. I didn't know her name. I didn't care. She lived long enough to ask for her people to remember me." Veil Thera's vision blurred. Memories of her mother's stories, of her own childhood, of fear and respect for humans, everything collided inside her. The woman her mother had spoken of, a stubborn, fierce human who had defied death to save a Keltari warrior. The stories, the whispers, they were true. Her hands clenched instinctively. She wanted to strike, to test if he was real, to make sure this was not a trick. But the mark, glowing faintly in the dying light of the battlefield, told her otherwise. The truth weighed heavy on her. This human had done what no Keltari ever expected. What few humans ever dared. He had saved one of them. At the cost of his own future, his own safety. "That battle," she said slowly, her voice trembling despite her effort to remain cold, "was 20 cycles ago." He nodded. "I know." Her mind raced. 10, maybe 20 cycles of hunting humans for survival, for revenge, for loyalty to her people. And this human had survived, carrying her mother's life, carrying a debt she had never been able to repay. That warrior. "She died shortly after," Veil Thera whispered, the memories of fire and smoke pressing in on her mind. "Your sacrifice, it was. For nothing." "No," he replied, shaking his head slightly. "It wasn't for nothing. She lived long enough to tell the others. Long enough for you to be here." Veil Thera's knees weakened. Her blade trembled in her grip. Every lesson, every rule she had followed since birth, seemed to crumble. Hesitation was death. Emotion was weakness. Mercy was failure. Yet here she stood, frozen, realizing that sometimes strength was measured differently. Sometimes courage did not come from fire or weapons. It came from choosing to save another life. Even when it meant risking your own. Silence fell over the ruins. The wind carried the smell of burned metal, ash and blood. The human before her was not surrendering, not begging, not cowering. He was standing there, holding a truth that Veil Thera's entire life had not prepared her for. "That mark," she said finally. her voice shaking with awe and disbelief. Means you are under Keltari protection, forever. The human gave a faint, tired smile. Funny thing, he said. Your people have been trying to kill me for years. Veil Thera lowered her blade slowly, inch by inch. Her hands shook. Her heart raced. Every instinct she had as a Keltari warrior screamed at her to finish him, to strike, to survive. But something stronger, a new understanding, something she had never felt before held her back. What is your name, human? She asked, her voice soft now, almost gentle. Elias Mar, he said. Veil Thera exhaled, a mix of relief and disbelief. I am Veil Thera, she said quietly, lowering her blade completely. And you should not be alive. Elias tilted his head slightly, a faint smile on his lips. Maybe life has a strange way of deciding who survives. Veil Thera stared at him, her mind racing. For the first time, she realized that life, courage, and loyalty were not measured by species or strength. Sometimes humanity itself could stop a warrior's blade, and in that moment, Veil Thera knew the war had changed forever, not because of fire or blood, but because of one human who dared to save a Keltari life when no one expected it. Her blade, once an extension of her will, now felt heavy in her hands. She lowered it completely. For the first time in her life, she did not know what to do. And for the first time, she realized that some enemies were also allies waiting to be understood. Veil Thera did not speak for a long moment. The battlefield around them seemed smaller now, less threatening. The wind carried ash and the smell of scorched metal, but it no longer filled her with anger. Instead, it reminded her of something else, memories long buried. Stories she had heard as a child about courage, sacrifice, and loss. Elias Mar, the human standing before her, lowered his hand and took a slow breath. You want to know the story? He asked quietly. His voice was calm, almost gentle, though there was a deep weight behind it. I've told it few, and now I guess it is time to tell someone who will understand. Veil Thera's eyes narrowed. Understanding humans had never been her goal. Killing them, surviving against them, that had been her life. But something in his tone stopped her. She nodded once, barely noticeable, a signal that he could speak. He began slowly, his words painting a picture more vivid than any Keltari hollow recording could. It was 20 cycles ago, on Vatris Prime. There was a human relief unit trapped behind enemy lines. Bombs fell from orbit. Fires spread faster than anything we could have imagined. I was part of that unit. Chaos everywhere. Screams, smoke, burning bodies. I didn't even see the Keltari at first. Veil Thera's mind raced. She remembered the stories her mother had told, how she had led a squad in that battle, fierce and unyielding, cutting through enemies to save what little she could. She had never known the human's name who had helped them, but now it seemed that he was standing here before her, scarred and exhausted, yet alive. I saw her under the debris, Elias continued. Your warrior. She was still fighting, even with half her armor gone. Fire licked at the walls. I could see the weight of the world trying to crush her. But she didn't stop. She told me to leave her, to save myself. She said humans weren't worth dying for. I didn't listen. Veil Thera's chest tightened. She clenched her fists around her blade. Though it no longer felt like a weapon, it felt heavy with emotion she could not name. She could see it now. The fire, the collapsing metal, the desperate grip of a human dragging a Keltari warrior to safety. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. That stubborn human, that foolish human, who had survived the impossible. I carried her to safety, Elias said. His voice cracked slightly. I shielded her with my body when a secondary blast hit. My spine broke. My arm was useless after that. They said I would never fight again. I didn't care. She lived. That was enough. Veil Thera's knees almost buckled. Her mother had spoken of that human only once, calling him reckless, brave, impossible. Now she understood. Every story her mother had whispered. Every memory Veil Thera had clung to of humans being fragile, stubborn, and unpredictable, it was all true. And after that, Elias said, his voice quieter now, I was marked. The oath mark burned into my hand by a Keltari medic. They said it meant I owed life forever, that I had saved one of their own, and now I was tied to them, whether I wanted it or not. Veil Thera lowered her bleed completely. Her mind spun with disbelief. 10 cycles, maybe more, of hatred and vengeance, and here he was alive, carrying a debt she had never known existed, a debt tied to her mother's life. Why are you here? She asked finally, her voice almost a whisper. After all this time. Why are you here, Elias Mar? He looked at her, pain and determination in his eyes. I never wanted to be a hero. I never wanted recognition. I just wanted to survive. But the galaxy has a way of bringing people back together. I am here because you are here, because I owe it to your people and to her. Veil Thera's heart raced. For the first time, she questioned everything she had believed. Humans were fragile, yes. Reckless, yes. But they carried something her people often lacked, the courage to choose right over safe. To protect another, even when it meant risking everything. I hunted humans for 10 cycles, she admitted, her voice low, trembling. Because my mother. Because she died in that war. I thought all humans were enemies. I thought they all brought only fire and death. Elias stepped closer, careful to keep his injured arm safe. Not all humans are the same, he said softly. Some fight for themselves. Some fight for others. Some, like me, just fight because they have to. Veil Thera's hands shook. Her blade, which had been her entire life, felt suddenly unnecessary. Her heart pounded, filled with confusion and awe. The human before her had survived impossible odds, carried a sacred debt, and still stood alive, undaunted, unbroken, and somehow human. For the first time, she realized that strength was not always measured by the sharpness of a blade or the glow of armor. Sometimes strength came from mercy. Sometimes courage came from protecting another life, even at the cost of your own. And in that moment, Veil Thera understood something she had never known. That human, scarred and broken, was more than an enemy. He was a testament to what her people had long ignored, that life, sacrifice, and honor were not bound by species, they were bound by heart, her blade. Once her extension of will and justice, now hung loosely at her side. And for the first time, Veil Thera did not know what to do. But she knew one thing, the world had shifted. Something inside her had changed, and the human standing before her, Elias Mar, was the reason. The quiet did not last. Veil Thera's sensors flared before her eyes could catch anything. A low hum, mechanical and threatening, grew louder in the distance. The wind carried a new smell, oil, heat, and the unmistakable scent of weapons ready to fire. Drones, strike drones, sleek and deadly, descended from the smoke-filled sky. Their engines screamed like angry beasts. Elias glanced up calmly, as if he had been expecting it. They're coming for me, he said quietly. There was no fear in his voice, only acceptance. I was part of the resistance cell on this world. They want me dead. Veil Thera's hand instinctively went to her blade, which hummed to life at her command. The blue energy along its edge pulsed. You cannot fight, she said sharply, scanning his torn uniform, the burns across his skin, the blood staining his chest. You are injured. You will die if you move. I can slow them down, he said, trying to rise. Pain twisted his face, but his determination did not waver. At least give you time to leave. Veil Thera's eyes narrowed. Her instincts screamed at her, and her heart pounded with a new kind of fear, the fear of losing someone she had come to realize she must protect. "The oath mark forbids me from letting you die," she said firmly. "I will not allow it." The drone's engines screamed closer. Blue and red targeting lights scanned the ruins, locking onto them. Vale Thera stepped in front of Elias without hesitation, her body tense, ready to fight. "Stay behind me," she commanded. Elias shook his head. "Not my style," he said with a faint, painful grin. "I'm still breathing. I can still help." The first drone fired. A beam of scorching energy ripped through the ground where Elias had been standing moments before. He dove back, hitting the rubble, but he fired a small blaster from his good hand, targeting the machine. Sparks flew. The drone staggered but kept moving, relentless. Vale Thera moved like lightning. Her blade cut through the air with precision. Energy slashed the first drone into pieces, sparks scattering like stars across the ground. Another drone fired, its pulse slicing the smoke around them. She deflected it with a swift strike, but the force slammed into her shoulder, sending a shock through her body. Pain flared, but she ignored it. Her focus was total. Elias gritted his teeth and took cover behind a broken transport. He fired again, slower this time, but with deadly accuracy. One drone exploded into flame, its wreckage falling onto the scorched earth. Vale Thera roared a sound that shook the air. She spun, slashing through another drone, her blade humming with rage and determination. Every strike was precise, deadly, and fast. Sparks flew. Smoke curled. The ruins shook under the battle. Then a third drone appeared, almost hidden in the clouds of ash. Its cannon charged, the red light aiming directly at Vale Thera's exposed side. She sensed it just in time. She lunged forward to strike, but the blast hit first. The force threw Elias across the debris. He landed hard, chest smoldering, arm useless. Pain twisted his face, but he tried to rise. Ias. Vale Thera screamed, the sound tearing through her chest like fire. Her heart leaped into terror, rage, and desperation all at once. She destroyed the last drone in a single, furious strike, cutting it into pieces before it could fire again. Sparks rained around her. Smoke and flame filled the ruins. And then, silence except for the distant crackle of burning metal and the shallow, pained breathing of Elias. Vale Thera ran to him, every step filled with fear and fury. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she checked his injuries. Smoke rose from his chest, and his breathing was shallow. His eyes flickered open weakly, meeting hers. "You can't die," she said, her voice breaking. "Not here. Not now. I forbid it." Elias tried a faint smile. "Guess. I always survive the impossible," he whispered, his strength failing him. Vale Thera's hands pressed to his chest, ignoring the pain in her own body. Her mind raced. Every Keltari law, every lesson, every instinct screamed that humans were expendable, weak and fragile. Yet here was one human, beaten and broken, defying death again. Tied to her people by the oath mark, deserving of protection, she activated an emergency Keltari Beacon 1 reserved for the highest priority of life-saving missions. Medical teams would arrive, but it would take minutes. Minutes she could not waste. No one, not even death, would take him from her side, not while she still breathed. Vale Thera pressed her hands against Elias's chest, ignoring the heat of the burns and the weight of the rubble around them. His breathing was shallow, each exhale a struggle. Sparks from the destroyed drones scattered across the ground, the smell of smoke and metal thick in the air. She had fought countless battles, faced warriors stronger than her, survived attacks that would have killed most Keltari, but nothing had prepared her for this feeling, fear for a human. "You can't die," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I will not let you die. Not now, not ever." Elias tried to lift his head, blood streaking his face. but pain twisted his features. "Vale Thera, I've survived worse," he said faintly, his lips curling into a weak smile. "I guess. Humans don't keep score." She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "This isn't about score." "You," her words faltered. She could not articulate the storm inside her. Rage, grief, awe, respect all collided. She had spent cycles hunting humans, believing them weak, fragile, unworthy of her mercy. Yet here he was, a man scarred and broken, who had risked everything for her people. Her people. Her mother. And now he lay dying before her eyes. Elias coughed, the sound rough and wet, and reached out with his good hand. His fingers brushed the oath mark on his palm. Vale Thera stared at it. That mark, burned into his skin decades ago, bound them across time, across life and death. It had been a promise she had never understood until now, a promise of loyalty, of debt, of protection. And now, that debt was being repaid. "You saved one of us once," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "You carried her through fire, risked everything. And now I am here. Saved me too, without knowing it." Elias's eyes flickered open briefly, a faint light of recognition passing through them. "Seems it's the cycle of life," he murmured. "One act leads to another." His smile was faint, but it carried warmth, humor, and bravery all at once. "Guess worth it." Vale Thera's hands trembled as she held him close. Her tears fell freely now, hot and heavy against her armor. She had never cried for a human before. She had never allowed herself to feel such vulnerability. But Elias Mar, stubborn, brave, impossible, had changed that. "Hold on," she whispered fiercely. "I will not lose you. I forbid it." She activated her emergency beacon fully, calling every available Keltari medical unit to their position. Sparks of energy flashed along her gauntlets as she reinforced a makeshift shield around them, deflecting the last flickering embers of danger. The battlefield had grown quiet again, but the tension did not ease. Minutes felt like hours. Every heartbeat of Elias's was a victory. Every shallow breath a triumph. "You don't understand," she said, clutching him tightly. "You should not have survived. You should not be here. And yet, you are." Her voice cracked under the weight of truth. "I owe you. My mother, my people. I owe you everything." Elias's hand twitched faintly. He managed a weak laugh, even in pain. "Funny, isn't it? Humans carry pain, but still fight, still survive." Vale Thera's heart ached with a strange combination of sorrow and admiration. She realized that survival was not just strength. It was courage, stubbornness, and the willingness to risk everything for someone else. Humans had a way of defying fate, of turning despair into determination, of making their lives meaningful in ways warriors like her had never imagined. She brushed a streak of blood from his forehead, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her gauntlet. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "I command you. You cannot leave me. Not now. Not ever." Elias's eyes softened, and he reached out to touch her armor lightly. "I stay. Because you," he whispered, his voice failing. "Because you cared enough to stop the blade." Vale Thera's tears fell freely now. For the first time in her life, she realized the true meaning of the oath mark. It was not just a mark of debt, it was a bridge. A connection that bound life to life, across species, across worlds. It was proof that courage and loyalty could exist beyond the battlefield. The distant hum of approaching Keltari medics reached them. Vale Thera refused to move. She held him, shielded him, as if her body alone could keep him alive until help arrived. Each heartbeat of his was a victory, each faint breath a testament to the human spirit. And in that moment, Surrounded by ruin and smoke, Vale Thera understood something profound. Life was precious. Courage was not measured in victories or kills, but in sacrifices made for others. And sometimes, even a warrior born to kill could be stopped by mercy, by compassion, by a hand extended in protection. She whispered over him one final time before medics arrived. "You are not alone, Elias Mar, never alone. I will not let you die. Your debt, your bravery, it will never be forgotten." And Elias, the human who had survived impossible fire, simply squeezed her hand weakly, the faintest smile on his lips. He had risked everything, carried a life through death, and now in his own quiet way, he had changed a Keltari warrior forever. The battlefield was no longer just a place of destruction. It had become a place of debt repaid, courage honored, and life preserved against impossible odds. Elias woke slowly, the bright white lights of the Keltari medical bay burning behind his eyelids. He blinked several times, trying to remember where he was, before the memories of the battlefield came rushing back. Flames, smoke, Vale Thera's voice, the drones, the searing pain in his chest. His body ached, every muscle screaming from the injuries he had barely survived. Vale Thera was there, sitting quietly beside his bed, her armor removed, her hair loose, the glow of her battle scars soft under the medical lights. She didn't speak, but her eyes watched him like a sentinel, steady and unyielding, even after all that had happened. "You're awake," she said finally, her voice low but firm. There was no accusation in it, no judgment, only observation. Elias tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his ribs made him wince. Yeah, he admitted, wincing. "I guess I broke a few rules." Vale Thera's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Yes, you did," she said, her tone steady, but her eyes betrayed relief. "Rules are easier to follow when you are not dying." He let out a weak laugh, though it hurt him. "Not dying. Sounds like a good rule." She shook her head, a shadow of a smile touching her lips. "Not every human survives what you did," she said softly. "I have seen my people fall. You should not have lived. But somehow, you did. And you saved one of ours." Elias looked down at his scarred hand, the oath mark still visible, faded but permanent. I did what anyone would have done," he said quietly. "I didn't think about marks or oaths or legends. I just acted." Vale Thera studied him. "No," she said firmly. "You did more than act. You changed the course of a Keltari life. You carried courage where others would have left it buried. And that matters." The two of them sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, the ruins of the battlefield glowed faintly in the distance, a reminder of all that had been lost, all that had been destroyed. And yet inside this sterile bay, life lingered. Breathing, fragile, stubborn, alive. Days passed. Elias recovered slowly, his body patched with Keltari medicine. But it was Vale Thera who observed the most significant recovery, the quiet understanding growing between them. Words were sparse, but each glance carried meaning. Respect, gratitude, awe, trust. A bridge had formed across species, across bloodlines, across the scars of war. One evening, as the sun set beyond the walls of the medical bay, Elias finally spoke fully. "You know," he said, his voice still weak, "I never understood your people. I thought humans were just pawns in your wars. Weak, short-lived, disposable. But I see now, we're stubborn, maybe reckless, but we survive. We protect, and sometimes we inspire." Vale Thera nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Humans carry something my people have often forgotten. Strength, yes. Courage, yes, but also mercy, loyalty, a willingness to protect life, even when it costs them everything. That is why you survived, Elias Mar. Not because you were strong. Because you acted where many would have hesitated." He chuckled softly. Funny, the galaxy thinks humans are fragile. We're stubborn, sure, but we leave behind stories. We leave behind hope. Even after war, even after fire, we leave behind reminders that life is worth fighting for. Vale Thera's hand drifted to his, fingers brushing over the oathmark. She felt a warmth, not from his skin, but from the bond it represented. She realized then that the mark was more than a debt. It was a symbol of connection, of shared courage, of lives intertwined across impossible odds. You changed more than my understanding of humans, she said quietly. You changed me. I hunted humans for 10 cycles, believing them to be enemies. I thought courage belonged only to warriors like me. But you, her voice faltered slightly. You have shown me something else, something important. Elias smiled faintly, his eyes closing for a moment. I didn't plan on it. I just acted. Vale Thera shook her head. No, you did more than act. You reminded a Keltari warrior that life is precious. That honor is not only in battle, but in protecting others. And that will never be forgotten. Outside, the twin suns of the system dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the bay. The ruins beyond glowed faintly with the last embers of the fires that had raged only days before. Inside, a human and a Keltari warrior sat side by side, silent, healed, and changed. The galaxy had not changed because of battles won or weapons fired. It had changed because one human had dared to save a Keltari warrior. And because that warrior, Vale Thera, had learned to see the true meaning of courage, mercy, and honor. In the quiet of the medical bay, she realized that some lessons could only be taught by life itself, by a hand extended in hope, by a human who refused to surrender even when death had already come calling. And in that moment, Vale Thera understood fully, humans were not merely survivors. They were teachers of courage, mercy, and hope. And she would carry that lesson forever. Years had passed since the battle on Vatris Prime and the ruins that had nearly claimed Elias Mar's life. Time had healed wounds, rebuilt armor, and reshaped destinies. Vale Thera walked steadily beside him, her dark silver armor polished but lighter somehow, as if she carried not just the weight of a warrior, but the memory of a debt repaid. Elias still moved slowly, a faint limp in his step from the injuries. He had barely survived, but there was a light in his eyes that no scar could dim. They walked across a quiet world far from the fighting, a world of green forests and gentle rivers. Alien children of many species played nearby, their laughter mingling with the wind. Some stopped to stare at the tall Keltari warrior and the human walking side by side. A few whispered stories they had heard of Vale Thera, the First Blade, and Elias Mar, the human who had survived impossible fire. Elias glanced at Vale Thera, his scarred hand brushing against hers as they walked. Do they know our story? He asked softly, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and humility. Vale Thera studied him, her face calm, her eyes reflecting both stars and memory. They will, she said. Because stories like yours, stories like ours, change the stars. He chuckled faintly. I just did what felt right at the time. She shook her head slowly, a shadow of a smile crossing her face. That is why the blade stopped. They walked in silence for a moment, the sun dipping low behind distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Vale Thera. Mind wandered back to that battlefield, to the drones, the smoke, the fear and fury. She remembered the exact moment she saw the oath mark on his hand, and how it had stopped her, frozen her instincts, changed everything she had known about life and honor. She turned to him, her hand reaching out. Slowly, carefully, she placed her palm against his. Open hand to open hand, scar to scar. For the first time in her life, Vale Thera felt the full weight of what humans could carry, not just pain or scars, but hope, courage, and an unbroken will to protect what mattered most. Elias squeezed her hand lightly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He didn't need words. They both understood. You know, Veilthera said softly, humans leave marks behind, not just on skin, not just in memory, on hearts, and sometimes on the universe itself. Elias looked at her, eyes glinting with quiet pride. Guess I'll take that as a compliment, he said, humor flickering through his tired tone. Veilthera allowed herself a small, rare laugh, the sound echoing lightly across the fields. It is more than a compliment, she said. It is truth. You survived when death said you would not. You acted when the universe expected you to hesitate. You carried life when all seemed lost. That is why humans are worth knowing, worth protecting. They continued walking, side by side. Two beings from different worlds, yet tied by unspoken debts, courage, and honor. Behind them, the alien children ran, chased by laughter and sunlight, unaware of the battles that had shaped the two figures before them. But Veilthera knew. Every step they took forward was a testament, a quiet lesson for the galaxy. Strength was not only in weapons, not only in war, but in mercy, in courage, and in the choice to protect another life. Elias glanced at her once more. So, do we tell them everything? He asked, nodding toward the children and the small crowd of aliens watching them curiously. Veilthera smiled softly, her dark eyes shining. Some things are learned in time, she said. Some things are shown through action. Today, we show them what it means to fight for life, to survive, to honor others even when it is not easy. The suns dipped lower, golden light reflecting off Veilthera's armor and Elias's scarred hand. They walked together, leaving footprints in the soft soil, footprints that would fade, but whose story would linger in that quiet world. Amidst laughter, trees, and distant rivers, the galaxy learned something vital about humans. They were not the fastest. They were not the strongest. They did not have the longest lives. But when a human opened their hand instead of raising a weapon, when they risked themselves for another, they could stop a warrior's blade. They could teach courage to the strongest. They could inspire honor in the fiercest. They could carry hope where others had given up. And in that moment, Veilthera understood fully, and the galaxy would remember. Humans were not just survivors. They were legends waiting to happen. Open hand to open hand, scar to scar, they walked forward, two different species, bound forever by trust, courage, and the quiet, unstoppable power of humanity. And in that simple act, the universe whispered the truth. Humanity. F***.